Hello, everyone. Welcome, and welcome to everyone on Zoom on this beautiful day. I appreciate all of you wearing green on this occasion. Thank you. Most of you told me it was an accident, but I'm grateful anyway. For those of you who don't know, I'm Caroline O'Donnell. I'm the chair of the Department of Architecture, and I have already done 2 introductions to the symposium, so I promise to be really, really brief. Especially for those who have heard it already. I will just go through the highlights of what I've already shared. To begin, Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Cayuga-Hono, the Cayuga Nation. The Cayuga-Hono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of the Cayuga-Hono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of the Cayuga-Hono people, past and present, to these lands and waters. So in really brief recap, it's our 150th birthday. It is not St. Patrick's birthday, I checked, and that is not the reason for March 17th being St. Patrick's Day. So Breaking Grounds is this semester's Preston H. Thomas Symposium. It's funded through a gift to Cornell's College of Architecture, Art, and Planning from Ruth and Leonard B. Thomas of Auburn, New York, in memory of their son, Preston. So, while an anniversary calls for celebration, we're also provided with an opportunity to zoom out, to reflect, to ask, and to probe the answers to important questions about our discipline's past, and especially our discipline's future. So we, last time, had the opportunity to look back 150 years, and I think the next 2 sessions are really asking the impossible, to think forward 150 years. The title, Breaking Grounds, is about the fundamental act of building, as in the first act of digging into the ground when we go to a construction site on the first day. But we use the title Breaking Grounds and the word breaking to also open up the possibilities that we might break with some traditions at this pivotal moment in architecture. So last week, as well as in our keynote and in our first session, opened up with the words that come before all else by Sachem George, and anyone who was here will agree that it was amazing. Amber Adams discussed the generation narrative of the Haudenosaunee people and the linguistic and cultural relationship between kinship and notions of the earth. Meredith Palmer talked about the land that was dispossessed in order for this institution to exist, and Sébastien Marot talked about the founding of the institution in the site-specific context of the Cayuga landscape. Groundwork then began with the grounds on which this institution was built, and the session established a foundation upon which architecture's interconnectedness with land, water, and air were built. Jumping forward to next week, next Tuesday, the 22nd, same time, same place, also followed by a reception in the Dome, which will feature a menu of futuristic food. The session looks at the education of the architect and asks how we might reimagine architectural pedagogy for an evolving world. That session will be presentations and dialogue between Milton Curry of University of Southern California, Dean, Sarah Whiting, Dean of Harvard GSD, and our own Dean Mi Jin Yoon. That session will be moderated by Jenny Sabin and Maria Gonzalez-Pendas. So tonight, the session really focuses on practice. And so we asked some speakers, not all of whom, some of whom who studied at Cornell, but I think all 3 of them are somehow unable to have escaped the Cornell pedagogy, right, which has affected many other institutions. And so we really asked them to reflect a little bit on their own education and think about how it was that this particular type of education allowed them to create a practice that was kind of breaking with the traditional notion of practice, and really then zoom out and think about questions of practice in the future, because all of you, the students, and I guess some of us, the faculty too, We all practice for a future world, right? The things that we design are to be built in the future and also to last for many years into the future. So I think we're really thinking about, if it's not possible to think about 150 years in the future, at least thinking about our careers lasting for 50 years more, and the buildings that we make potentially lasting for 150 years. So this session, FORMWORK, is really about the future of practice. Before allowing Lily and Marta to introduce, I'd like to take one more minute to say thank you to everyone who helped to make this event possible, most especially teaching associate Wendelin Gonzalez. Wendy, again, she's probably doing some work, but yes, has done a phenomenal job. Thanks, Wendy. Also Julene Rickard, M. Constantine, Edith Fikes, Alix de Turquoise, Lily Chi, Sean Anderson, Marta Wisniewska, Jenny Sabin, Maria Gonzalez-Pendas, John Zisevich, Joy Davis, Jingyao Wang, Jonathan Plass, Jack Lynch, and all of the speakers, as well as Andre Hafner and his team. So thanks, everybody. That's it from me, and I will welcome Lily Chi and Marta Wisniewska to do the introductions.
Hello, everyone. It's so wonderful to see so many of you joining us in person and online, despite this gorgeous weather outside. And thank you, Caroline, for not forcing us to wear green today. My name is Marta Heisel-Wiśniewska. I'm a lecturer at the Architecture Department here at Cornell. And as Caroline mentioned, together with Professor Lily Chi, we'll be moderating tonight's session. And one of our tasks is to introduce our speakers today. Without further ado, I will start with Laurie Brown, who has developed a creative research practice focusing on the relationships between architecture and social justice issues, with particular emphasis on gender and its impact upon spatial relationships in hope to broaden the discourse and involvement of architecture in our world. She's the co-founder and leads Architects X, I hope that I pronounced it right, a women and architecture group working to bridge the academy and practice in New York City. In its framework, she seeks to raise the awareness of women in architecture, create support and mentoring networks, and take design actions broadening the exposure of architecture in the world. Architects X's current curatorial project is Traveling Exhibition, Now What? Advocacy, Activism, and Alliances in American Architecture since 1968, and has been supported by the Graham Foundation, New York City State Council for the Arts, and the National Endowments for the Arts. Through Architects X, she is also currently collaborating with the Australian group Parlor on WikiD to write more women architects into Wikipedia, which has been supported by Wikimedia Foundation. Her 2 books include Feminist Practices, Interdisciplinary Approaches to Women in Architecture, an edited collection of a group of international women designers and architects employing feminist methodologies in their creative practice that began as a traveling exhibition. And the second book, Contested Spaces, Abortion, Clinics, Women's Shelters, and Hospitals, exploring highly scrutinized spaces and an impact legislation at the First Amendment's effect upon such places. She's working with 2 abortion clinics on designing interventions for the public interface. Currently, her 2 book projects include Birthing, Borders, and Bodies, and co-editing the Bloomsbury Global Encyclopedia of Women in Architecture from 1960 to 2015 with Dr. Karen Burns. She's a fellow of the American Institute Architects and a 2021 Architecture League of New York Emerging Voices recipient. She's a professor and director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at the School of Architecture, Syracuse University, and a registered architect in New York State. Please help me welcome Laurie Brown.
Okay, 1 second.
Oh dear, what happened? All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really delighted to be here to be a part of this series to celebrate the anniversary of your school and the contributions it continues to make to the discipline. And I also want to thank Caroline for the invitation to be a part of this. So I'm just going to jump right in. And I will say, as Caroline was framing what we were supposed to talk about, I realized I'm not hitting all of the pieces, but hopefully I will be hitting some of them. So I will begin with a quote from Donna Haraway. She writes, "It matters what thoughts think thoughts. It matters what knowledges know knowledges. It matters what relations relate relations. It matters what worlds world worlds. It matters what stories tell stories." When I imagine the future of practice, Haraway's words resonate with me and my work because I have been invested in these ideas for a very long time. It's critical to understand who writes knowledge, disciplinary knowledge, whose practices are deemed worthy, what a canon means, whose voices it represents, and most importantly, whose voices it suppresses, ignores, or prevents from being heard. It is critical, vitally important, to begin to become aware of such constructions because as future architects and designers, you do not live nor will you practice in a vacuum. Knowledge and by extension, voices yield power. I also want to dispel the lone genius myth. It is both a fabrication and a farce. Architects, by the very nature of what we do, work with others. There is no lone soul star out there. There are teams and there are collaborations. This will become ever more vital in the future of practice. Haraway's writings speak to me and how practice cannot remain as it has been and about the discipline's future. Given the world we live in right now and the projected future of our planet, the extremes of wealth and inequalities not seen since the Gilded Age, the rise of white supremacist politics and xenophobia, the drive to eliminate women's bodily autonomy both here and abroad, and the absolute most pressing environmental consequences of our lifetime, necessitates that architectural practice must be different moving forward. I seek to broaden the discourse around the discipline of architecture by enhancing societal awareness of the too often untapped potential of architects' practice and expanding for whom architecture serves, while raising awareness of women's contributions to the built environment. My research and engagement create bridges between architecture, a field historically and woefully underrepresented by women and people of color, and the public. My work can be traced to the intersections of my experience as a woman in a still white male-dominated discipline, and my desire for architecture to contribute more significantly in improving the built environment for a broader public. I have focused on expanding the role of architecture in reproductive health care, women's shelters, birthing centers, immigration spaces, areas often overlooked or ignored by our discipline. I operate at the intersection of theory and practice, which informs my feminist methodologies. I seek to create change and action out in the world. I locate my work within what scholar Sandy Grand has termed the feminist political project, one that is not solely interested in academic feminism, but engages broader frames of the historical materialist intersecting with race, capitalism, labor, and economic power. I discover ways to bring my architectural expertise into a range of arenas where we historically have not been present. I work to make change through a variety of ways and scales of endeavor. I research and write. I design with ignored segments of the population. I use my architectural expertise to engage legislative entities that have used building codes for political machinations. I co-founded and lead Architects, an organization that promotes all women-identified individuals to foster more diversity and inclusion within the academy and practice, and for us to take action out in the world, engaging highly politicized topics. I question the architectural canon and am creating a diverse body of architectural knowledge more reflective of our society, and through these efforts, building a transnational feminist coalition to create global change. The projects I will discuss illustrate how I seek to transform the discipline for a different future. I will focus on two larger research areas, the first being gender and diversifying the discipline, and the second, the politics of space. So why does it matter what our discipline looks like and who is in our discipline? Why should we care who becomes an architect? What do these issues mean for the future of our practice? Because the built environment both represents and reinforces certain voices and life experiences, the world we live in must become more reflective of this diversity and requires we have a more diverse discipline in order to do so. So it begs the question, who leads, both globally as well as disciplinarily? So I want to give you just a few data points. According to the United Nations Women, it's not great in terms of women leading in all aspects of government across the globe. And I want to highlight that there are 19 countries that have reached or surpassed a 40% gender quota. And these were reached because there were gender quotas put into place. So then when we start to look at our own accrediting board of architecture in the US and Canada, and who's teaching architecture, it still remains rather very white and very male. And when you look at the distribution overall of ethnicity, we have a long way to go for the professoriate to reflect our population more globally. And then when we look at who are our students, and granted, Cornell is an incredibly diverse student body, as is my own institution at Syracuse, but across the board, for the 2019 data, we see that we've reached pretty much gender parity with degrees being awarded, but those demographics are still incredibly white overall across North America. And when we look at who are leading institutions of education in architecture, there's around a third who are female directors, heads, and chairs, and around a third that are deans. So I provide these statistics to illustrate a greater point. The numbers of gender representation in a group matter for change to take place. In research exploring these impacts of gender parity in decision-making, I discovered two professors, Princeton professor Tali Mandelberg and Brigham Young University professor Christopher Kopolowicz, who were looking at how does gender impact policymaking. And they found that female lawmakers significantly reshape policies only when they have true parity with men. In their studies on percentages of women in focus groups, when women comprise only 20% of a decision-making body operating by majority rule, the average woman took up only about 60% of the floor time used by the average man. Women were perceived by themselves and their peers as more quiescent and less effective. They were more likely to be rudely interrupted, they were less likely to strongly advocate their policy preferences, and they seldom mentioned the vulnerable. These gender dynamics held even when adjusting for political ideology, beliefs about liberalism and egalitarianism and income. But once women made up 60 to 80% or more of a group, they spoke as much as men, raised the needs of the vulnerable, and argued for redistribution and influenced the rhetoric of their male counterparts. They also encountered fewer hostile interruptions. In another study, the researchers poured through a sample of minutes from more than 14,000 local school boards and found that the pronounced gender gap in participation shrank sharply when women's numbers reached parity, a real-world confirmation of their research findings. If more women are a part of governance, more concerns women have that may or may not be similar to men will be put forward and heard. The same is true for architecture. The starting point for strategies of gender quotas in political office began with the United Nations World Conference of Women in 1975. And as an example, in 1991, Argentina passed the first quota law in South America. This law required that parties nominate 30% of women on their list of candidates. By the end of that decade, quotas were in place in most countries across South America. Architectural theorist and a collaborator of mine, Karen Burns, notes in her essay, Women in Architecture, that a UK government commission report on women on corporate boards concluded evidence suggests that companies with a strong female representation at board and top management level perform better than those without, and that gender-diverse boards have a positive impact on performance. In March 2015, Germany joined these ranks, requiring women to hold 30% of supervisory seats on corporate boards. However, this is not a new practice. In 2008, Norway became the first country to meet mandated boardroom quotas of 40%. Several other European countries have created minimum 40% quotas, including Spain, France, and Ireland. Italy and Belgium both have a 30% quotas, as well as the Netherlands. So research shows that diversity creates more successful businesses and representative governments. The future of practice requires ever more diverse teams to be able to bring different experiences to bear on society's most pressing needs. For change to occur, more women must be recognized for our contributions to the discipline. And as was mentioned in the very generous introduction, one of my initial efforts, sparked by my students and their frustration due to not hearing enough about women and people of color in any of their classes, was to curate the exhibition Feminist Practices. This led to the edited book, Feminist Practices, Interdisciplinary Approaches to Women in Architecture. Little did my students realize that our earlier conversations would change the trajectory of my life, quite literally. In my role as an architecture professor, I was compelled to take action. As a direct result of these efforts, it led to the co-founding of Architects, as was mentioned, a New York-based equity organization for women in architecture. And as also was highlighted, our global efforts to write more women into Wikipedia. And I will say we have thus far worked with over 300 writers. We've created over almost 400 new entries. We've created almost 1,000 new articles and increased 580,000 new words into entries in Wikipedia. And most recently, we have our traveling exhibition with curators Sarah Ravison, Andrea Merritt, and Roberta Washington. This exhibition is an interactive one with an online catalog with an eventual publication that tells the largely unknown history of architects and designers who have intersected with political movements and advanced issues of equity and social justice, specifically those of the civil rights, feminist, LGBTQ, and environmental movements of the last half century. All of the information is organized around 4 categories: representation, academy, workplace, and advocacy. We ask at each venue that people write in content that's specific to its own location, that generates new content as it has traveled. So this project is always an archive in the making. The final exhibit is now at the Boston Society of Architecture until the end of September. This exhibition foregrounds the myriad efforts of many working to evolve as we practice, who we practice for, the necessity for architectural education to create more diverse curricula and public programming, and ways that architecture directly responds to contemporary political issues. The last project I want to briefly highlight is the Global Encyclopedia, the Bloomsbury Global Encyclopedia of Women in Architecture, 1960 to 2015. This is a very large project. We're going to be published next year, finally. It will have over 1,100 entries by 360 authors with a global advisory board as well as a global group of area editors. The survey consists of biographical microhistories of women in architecture, accompanied by scholarly essays and a range of thematic entries for each region that explore key ideas and contests of spatial production. As well, a global timeline collates key historical events with the history of women's rights across the globe and significant moments in a history of women in architecture. The encyclopedia challenges chronological histories by presenting a geographically organized approach to a specific historical period. Our geographic focus counters the privileging of the global north in histories of women in architecture and in the history of architecture more generally. A global encyclopedic approach to women in architecture follows the transnational turn taken in feminist history, theory, and activism. Transnationalism first emerged as an analytic category in the late 1980s, but the field has flourished since the turn of the 21st. Following this global turn, the encyclopedia aimed to place histories of feminism in a spatial rather than a temporal frame, to emphasize the multiple points of origin for histories of women's entry into architecture. As geographer Susan Stratford Friedman argues, feminist theories, agendas, and political practices are grounded in acknowledgement of the specificity of gender systems and their intersection with movements for social justice. The global focus reveals the contours of, thank you. Oops. Reveals the contours of different equity struggles, such as the intersections of women's rights with the anti-colonial, communist, anti-communist, and other liberation movements of the 20th century and the current struggles of the 21st. In our encyclopedia, individual biographies and regional introductory essays challenge the chronologies of periodization of the struggles of women's rights in architecture. This co-location of liberation movements is made explicit in Andarata Siddiqui's account of Sri Lankan architect Minette de Silva. Siddiqui carefully weaves together a snapshot of de Silva's subject formation using familial and historical intersections of religious and cultural differences, the aesthetics and politics, and the movements for independence and women's rights. She writes, de Silva was the first woman from Sri Lanka to practice architecture professionally. She credits her mother's involvement in the related arts and crafts movement with her own interest in reviving the arts and crafts and incorporating artisanal elements into modernist buildings later in her career. She goes on and writes that her studies were interrupted by the tumultuous Quit India protest of 1942, and that with new regulations allowing Indian students to complete their architectural education within British institutions, de Silva was able to matriculate to the Architectural Association, where she studied from 1945 to 47. Our project also foregrounds women who had previously been ignored. It expands the definition of architectural practice to include a much broader range of spatial engagement, from women as architectural critics to pedagogues to urban planners to heritage architects, policymakers, activists, and curators. That we aim to challenge definitions of architectural practice. The biography of Pakistan architect Yasmin Lari illustrates this expanded field of practice. After graduating from Oxford Brookes University in 1964, she returned to Pakistan and established a practice with her husband in Karachi. They worked in housing, government, and commercial architecture. After retiring from practice, I say in quotes, in 2000, Laurie entered an energetic phase of historical research, heritage work, including a position as a UNESCO National Advisor, research on informal settlements and vernacular housing, the development of zero-carbon footprint construction in post-disaster communities, with a focus on women's economic empowerment, and knowledge transfer through mobile barefoot caravan teams. Another aspect of our project must consider geopolitics. When we were early in the conversations with the area editors of Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, and Central Asia, there was much debate about East-West histories and how to incorporate Russian and the former socialist and former Soviet Union histories. Discussions and debate resolved that this larger terrain could be structured as three larger spatial categories. Within these territorial and spatial categories, individual nations and their formal boundaries would be included, but overlaps would also be noted and theorized. The area editors agreed that they could specifically commission essays which would be territorially situated, would be necessarily inwards or outwards looking. Once entries are received, then the area editor's own introductory essays could section off or interconnect parts of the territorial spatial categories that they began with. These critical insights are made possible because the area editors have on-the-ground expertise and knowledge and understand the geopolitics of the region. This has become even more critical given what is now taking place in Ukraine. Just last week, we were finishing the last round of edits in this section and correspondence with one of the area editors where she wrote, "Most of the contributors to our section are directly affected by what is going on. We've not been able to reach our Ukrainian contributors and feel helpless. The entire section feels like a last performance of normal scholarship and international collaboration before the region explodes and the Iron Curtain falls down." So like all feminist work, the encyclopedia aspires to be politically transformative. Through the project, we hope to build alliances that might transform the discipline, using the project to begin and build an expanding network that will persevere even after publication. By revealing interconnections between feminism and other social movements, we hope to span architectural social justice framework. By bolstering transnational alliances, we organize and act as activists beyond borders. And through this methodological approach, we work across differences in race, country, and class. By challenging the pervasiveness of the formal architectural canon of buildings, new practices will be made public and more expansive types of practices will be highlighted. We hope that this project will contribute to the growing concern with broadening the discipline of architecture to imagine other future trajectories for the spatial practitioner, both within and beyond building production. So the second folk area that I will spend the rest of my time on is around the politics of space. And the impetus for my interest and work in this area stems from my frustration by what my perceived lack of our political engagement by our discipline. And so I remain compelled to investigate topics that are unavoidably political. I will highlight just one area of this research to illustrate how it has evolved in response to conditions on the ground, to people I meet, and to opportunities that arise through these. And the first is through my second book, Contested Spaces. This work explores spaces that have been ignored or even perceived as irrelevant to the discipline, ones that are solely used by women in some cases. This is important because, as philosopher Sandra Harding writes, this sort of research generated from the experiences of women are critical for the larger concerns of social life in general. For women should have an equal say in the design and administration of the institutions where knowledge is produced and distributed for reasons of social justice. This research seeks to make explicit political, economic, cultural, and social influences. Where or can spatial agency be located, and how can our architectural thinking bring new insight into these subjects? So to help you understand some of the things that initially drew me to this, I want to show a short clip outside of the clinic in Louisville, Kentucky from 2012.
90% of women that exterminate their children are doing it out of convenience. Please today repent and turn to Christ. It's so important. Again, as I said,
Where are they getting all these programs done?
we clarify again, mothers.
So what you just observed was patients who were being escorted by clinic escorts, walking a full city block, lined by protesters in order to get into the front door of the clinic. So for me, this really exemplifies one of the initial things that drew me to this research, was how does the legal geographies of access impact the physical landscape in and around buildings and spaces of care. So as polarizing as an issue of abortion is in various parts of North America and beyond, it provides a platform to think through complex relationships of space, a woman's body, varying degrees of federal and state control, the fluid and ever-shifting terrain of reproductive health care access, the potentials of design thinking and transforming spatial relationships in ways to radically rethink and find agency within them. And I think it would be irresponsible of me not to remind you that there is a case in front of the Supreme Court right now that will be decided in June, probably, Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, that could literally end the federal right to access abortion in this country. So this project that I began quite a while ago, I thought would end with the book, but in fact, there's still an incredibly critical need to continue doing this work. So this research uses analytical mapping and spatialization methods. It includes interviews with clinic providers, owners, clinic employees, and escorts. It required that I look deeper into states that were more restrictive. So this is the sole clinic in Mississippi that still exists. Once I began to understand some of these influences, it required me to understand more clearly what are the issues shaping this. So what are the rates of poverty in these states for single women, head of households with children under 5, because statistically they are seeking these procedures at a higher rate. It also required to understand what are the restrictions state legislatures are forcing clinics to undergo. Some of them are very directly connected to the physical environment, so forcing or requiring building codes to change from medical codes to ambulatory building code compliant. It also, some stipulate that buildings that are publicly funded cannot be used for care. So then it also required, or I thought about, how can we really reimagine what access looks like? So if we start to think about hospitals as a point of contact, there are 112 hospitals in the state of Mississippi, so it radically changes the geography in the state. Additionally, if we look at pharmacies and emergency contraception, that also, there's 462 pharmacies in the state of Mississippi, and myself and research assistants called all of these pharmacies to find out if they stocked and sold emergency contraception, to understand what are the other interlocking complexities in seeking access. So we found through this data collection that 66% of male pharmacists and 55% of female pharmacists would not stock or sell emergency contraception. So you may have a pharmacy in your neighborhood, but that doesn't guarantee you'll actually be able to fill, it's not a prescription anymore, but be able to buy it across the counter. Another piece of this research was looking at Supreme Court cases, because these have set up physical precedent around buildings and bodies, and I'll use Hill versus Colorado as an example. It began as a city ordinance in Boulder, Colorado in 1986, where they defined a 100-foot boundary around a clinic that protesters could not trespass, nor an 8-foot bubble around bodies moving in and out of that 100-foot zone. This made its way all the way up to the state Supreme Court, eventually the United States Supreme Court, and in 2000, the United States Supreme Court upheld the state decision. So this has become a legal precedent, which is very specific about dimensions around bodies. I've also had the good fortune to present this in many different venues and have been introduced to clinic owners across the country. And there's a clinic owner in Huntsville, Alabama, who is interested in creating a different design interface, what we would call a fence in front of and around their clinic, but he was really wanting this project to contribute to the neighborhood. He was very concerned about the impact this would have, so the aesthetics and the quality of what would be created was incredibly important for this project. There's also the possibility to move protesters, displace them slightly from the clinic entrance, and then thinking about how this fence would wrap the property and respond to different types of pressure as it makes its way around. One side would be quite solid, the other would begin to have infrastructure for watering and to create a lush interior landscape, a vertical landscape on the interior. So this wall takes on different material characteristics as it's responding to different situations along the property. And here's an image of the outside. He also was interested in embedding sprinklers in this wall that could be used to water a variety of things, which may include or not protesters. And then this interior, they wanted a shaded spot as well as a play area, who would have thought. The escorts had mentioned that people who come and bring their friends and family members have to sit in their car for 4 or 5 hours. They're not allowed into the building. So could you create some sort of outdoor space and even play space for children as they're having to wait? So this really kind of blew apart what I thought a site for an abortion clinic would be in a really, I think, interesting way. So I want to just briefly conclude. And I want to return to the question of why does representation matter? As I have presented, more diverse architectural voices bring different experiences to bear and explore uncharted areas, thus expanding the discipline. As architects and those invested in the future of the built environment, your life experiences and positionalities will create a different discipline to become more responsive to the world's diversifying demographics and our ever-complicated needs. The future of practice must become more overtly willing to engage and respond to contemporary challenges. If we do not, we fail the majority of the world's population and further risk becoming a service to only the privileged. I'd like to conclude with a quote by Joan Kerner, the first woman premier of Victoria, Australia. She has stated, "There is no such thing as being non-political. Just by making a decision to stay out of politics, you are making the decision to allow others to shape politics and exert power over you. And if you are alienated from the current political system, then just by staying out of it, you do nothing to change it. You simply entrench it. To not participate is a choice, but one I fervently urge you not to make. The future of practice has the opportunity, I argue, the ethical responsibility to engage. I want to ask you, what do you aspire to do to create a future world that is more just and equitable? One where our discipline rises to the needs of society and the environment's most pressing challenges. One where the knowledge producers actually represent the diverse and intersectional identities of our world. Join me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lori. I'm really looking forward to the discussion later, as I think there's going to be some amazing cross currents between the three talks. I'm Lily Chi, teacher here at Cornell. I'm here to introduce Nina Cook-John back to Cornell. Really happy that you're here. Nina is the founding principal of Studio Cook-John Architecture and Design, a multidisciplinary design studio that values placemaking as a way to transform relationships between people and the built environment, working at the scale of the human body, individually or collectively, in the home or on the street, responding to how we use space in our everyday lives, within the family unit, and as a community. Studio Cook-John was recently selected to design the new Harriet Tubman Monument in New York, New Jersey, to be unveiled in the summer of 2022. The studio was commissioned for the studio was awarded 2021 AIA Merit Award for the public art installation Point of Action, commissioned for the Flatiron Public Plazas in 2020, and currently on view at the Wasaic Project. Nina was named the 2020 United States Artist Fellow. Her work has been featured in Architectural Record, Madame Architect, the New York Times, Dwell, NBC's Open House, and the Center for Architecture's 2018 exhibition, Close to the Edge, The Birth of Hip Hop Architecture, and PBS NewsHour Weekend. Nina began her professional career working in offices, I'm going to skip over offices in New York, working at, amongst other firms, Polshek in New York before starting her own firm. She is licensed to practice in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, Nina has earned her Bachelor of Architecture from Cornell University and has done an MSAD at another institution in New York State. She has been a design educator for 20 years. Wow, I feel really old. Teaching at NYIT, Syracuse, Parsons, and currently at the Columbia Graduate School of Architecture Planning and Preservation. Welcome back to Cornell, Nina. Please.
Okay, let's make sure this is showing. Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Lily. And thank you, Caroline, and Wendelin and the rest of the Symposium committee for inviting me to be a part of this lecture series. I think the last time I was at Cornell was probably in 2003. I was here for one of Milton Curry's final reviews, and so that was a very long time ago. And so I'm delighted to be back here to be a part of the discussion with Lori and Arthur tonight. So in thinking about the directive of Breaking Grounds, as we mark the 150th anniversary of the architecture department here at Cornell, to reflect and expound on the history and future of the department, I'll talk a bit about the trajectory of my own practice. Within that context, describing how my studio has evolved into a multidisciplinary one, grounded in my time here at Cornell, and layered with my experiences as an immigrant, a Black woman in the United States, and as a parent. So I transferred to Cornell from City College in New York, and then I brought one important part of my support network with me, my bestie at the time, but who was also an immigrant from the Caribbean. But once we got here, we found a larger community amongst the Black and BIPOC designers and artists in AAP. As a group, supported by the Office of Minority Educational Affairs, then under the directive of Ray Dalton, we not only provided mentorship and help with the daily trials of architecture students in Rand Hall, we also danced together in the Ujamaa sweat boxes and engaged each other in debate around architecture's potential impact on each of our communities and our roles in widening the architectural discourse both within the Cornell community and beyond. Cornell underwrote our trips to NOMA conferences each year, where we commiserated and expanded the discussion with other Black architects and students from across the country. This group of Blackitects, as we called ourselves, continue to make up my primary architectural support system, and you'll hear me mention them throughout my talk. I lean on them regularly for advice on professional practice, career moves, and for feedback on creative work, as each of us have gone on to do work of differing types, both in practice and in academia. So Cornell encouraged me to stretch the limits of formal expression while incorporating varying sources of theoretical discourse into my spatial explorations. Cornell took me through London, Paris, Lugano, and Torino. We visited Corb in the countryside and in the banlieues. However, the academy had a blind spot. We seemed to ignore the people, those people in the banlieues. So this photo on the screen really was the grounding image for the grounding project that I've been coming back to more and more as my practice expands. The project was my undergraduate thesis, completed in 1995. John Z., I don't know if you remember this project. This was the first opportunity to take my practice home. The first opportunity to insert myself, my interests, into a studio project. The image is faded. It is from a book, photocopied multiple times. But if you look closely, you might be able to make out a range of materials put together in creating a simple shelter. The image was important because it embodied the bricolaging that those on the margins practice daily, the act of piecing together whatever they have in an act of making do. It was also the visual representation of the Jamaican saying, Tonya Han McFashion, which alludes to a creativity in that making do, which moves past survival into thrival, a term I borrow from Amanda Williams' class of '97. The thesis examines the condition of the West Indian immigrant in New York City, who, as Black immigrants are suddenly confronted with the reality of Blackness in America. They resist assimilation as identifying themselves as African Americans put them on the lowest rung of American racial social hierarchy. They exist in this state of in-between, as sojourners, waiting and planning for their return home. But often when they return home, they need to create separate communities again, as the home they left doesn't exist anymore. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie addresses the state of the non-American Black in her novel Americana. She makes it clear that America doesn't care that you are Jamaican or Ghanaian. They must join the rest of American Blacks, and in so doing, take on the cloak of invisibility. It is within the blind spots of racial complexity that Tommy E. describes in Multiplicity of Black Narratives in Adichie's Americana that the investigation of the thesis sits. So I keep coming back to this project from almost 30 years ago, as it provides the foundation for my continuing investigation of invisibility, visibility, hypervisibility, belonging, and how people act collectively in public space, how we protest, celebrate, and remember. The project was a searching for an architectural practice that uses tactics of appropriation for self-actualization and community building. So I begin by hunting for spaces that could be co-opted to serve the community. I used a process of layering, building upon the existing urban fabric with the collective memories of home that immigrants bring with them. The result is this hybridization, which approaches that same hybridization found throughout the built environment in Kingston and in many cities of the global South. The process of transformation continues until the spaces became habitable. In so doing, creating small community spaces to be used for performances, meetings, or just for hanging out. Urban porches. These insertions into the urban fabric remind the city that they exist, these people exist, and they remind the community that they belong. They were treated like prototypes that could be inserted in varying neighborhoods in both the Bronx and Brooklyn. Most of my career as an independent practitioner, however, my practice has focused on residential design. This was the mode of work that best supported my family at the time as a working parent of 3 children. I spent this time lifting everyday spaces into places of tailored comfort for families of all types through a process of responding to the way each client moves about and gathers in their homes with attention to detail and craft. This was an effort not only in design, but also in collaboration with clients on the vision and with fabricators and contractors on the detailing and installation. This dynamic of client and fabricator collaboration also extended to the cultural institutions and commercial interior projects that we worked on. Once my kids were older, I began to search for competitions around urban life to get myself back into work with public engagement, to provide the same detail and craftsmanship to support empowerment in public space. The Power in the Dark project was a quick charrette. It was a response to an international ideas competition around the nighttime economy in London. From beginning to end, we spent about 4 weeks in the middle of the night working on this project. I collaborated with my brother, Sekou Cook, class of '99, as well as with my business partner at the time. We explored a strategy to promote women walking at night without fear. In When Streets Become Supernatural, Nick Dunn describes how walking at night can be a strange and exhilarating experience. But women don't have that privilege, the privilege of walking purposelessly at night. A woman can enjoy this purposeless walking in the street at night without recrimination. Why was she alone? Where was she going so late? What did she expect? A decent woman does not go out at night alone. Women are supposed to be afraid of the dark, not wandering aimlessly through the night streets. So we asked, how might we help women to take back the night? How might we give women the power to walk the streets without fear? Because, as Andrea Dworkin says in her Take Back the Night speech, freedom of movement is precondition for freedom of anything else. The focus was the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood in Brooklyn, a subway desert of sorts and home to nurses, MTA workers, as well as others who work at night, all who could benefit from being able to walk the night fearlessly. We took inspiration from these simple black and white signs located throughout the neighborhood. These signs are over 60 years old and were our community's response to white flight and the resulting neglect of the city government as more blacks moved into what was then called Brooklyn's Little Harlem. Women are statistically more likely to be assaulted by someone they know than a stranger. Regardless, anyone walking with confidence is less likely to be a victim of an attack. Our focus would be on eliminating fear by instilling crowd-sourced confidence. So after walking the neighborhood, we decided to capture spaces between buildings for new installations, similar to those that the community created 60 years before. So the Power in the Dark installations would be located throughout the neighborhood, the physical part of a larger system. Women could access the app, becoming a member of a larger group of women, helping each other to feel safe as they walk through the streets. Much like we already do when we text friends and family, letting them know where we are and when to expect them home. People feel safer when an area is lit, so light poles are one of the constants of the installations in every location, with other parts changing from site to site. The light is activated only as women with the app approach. The light pole is sometimes paired with a mirrored steel panel etched with supportive messages. The mirrored panel also allows anyone walking by to see what might be lurking beyond their sight lines in the corners, again, feeling just a bit safer. Video panels project supportive messages where the real-time texts from women warning others of what they might expect ahead, or general messages of support. So operating much like the driving app Waze, by women and for women. These screens would only be in locations large enough to accommodate them, and the voices and faces of women giving support would be shown as the screens as those are walking by. Perhaps they could stop and respond or otherwise interact. Light strips in the sidewalk mark the location of the installations while scanning women as they walk across. So if they have the tracking feature turned on, and friends can follow along, making sure that they're en route and get an estimate of when they will arrive. So to end, Andrea Dworkin ends her speech, we must use our collective strength and passion and endurance to take back this night and every night, so that life will be worth living and so that human dignity will be a reality. So the point of action was my first built public art project. This installation was commissioned in July 2020 by the Van Allen Institute and the 23rd Street bid. This was at the height of the pandemic and political unrest of that summer. So it was installed in the Flatiron public plazas. In the Flatiron public plazas, these issues of visibility, invisibility, and belonging were again an important part of the critical exploration of this project. So to begin the exploration, I was thinking through how people from all different backgrounds, racial, cultural, and socioeconomic, rub shoulders daily in New York City, but really never or rarely make eye contact. We sit next to each other on the subway, and we have no idea about the critical issues that affect each of us in our siloed neighborhoods. So how can we be seen, not just in the moments of hypervisibility, when you seem to be in a place where you aren't expected or welcome? Working with collage and physical models was an important part of my process, as it was ultimately a form-making exploration in the service of public engagement. Making with my hands gave me a more direct connection to the design process. Equally important was checking in with my crew, Nate Williams, class of '93, and Andres Hernandez, class of '97, were a great source for feedback as I brainstormed ideas. How can we be seen and be forced to see? Point of Action invites New Yorkers and visitors to contemplate the experience of seeing one another and being seen. Once the viewer steps out of their usual routine and into the installation's threshold, there are multiple opportunities for connection with fellow viewers and with passersby. 6-foot circles affixed onto the Flatiron public plazas create 9 spotlights. You're seeing here the 6 from the North Plaza, each with its own vertical metal frame. Ropes weave through each frame and part like a curtain, figuratively pulled aside, to make room for the viewer to take the spotlight, connect with other viewers across the plazas, and take action as they move out and beyond. Lighting emitted from a halo above each circle strengthens the framing. Lights embedded into the sides of each frame add another layer to the viewer. I really had to understand the scale of the human body as it would engage each piece, and work on each of these being individual and unique installations across the site. Once installed, the piece becomes a part of the public landscape, encouraging people to engage with it however they want to. After the installation in New York City, the installation moved to Montclair, New Jersey in a suburban setting and is now on view at the Mosaic Project in the rural setting of Dutchess County. So last year, I teamed up with another one of my Moab crew, Hansi Better, class of '98 of Studio Luz. And our proposal was one of the finalists for the landmark installation project in Providence, Rhode Island. After 2 days of meetings with stakeholders, community members, historians, the critical question for us here was, how can one site tell the story of the Cape Verdean community sailing across the Atlantic to create a new home in Providence, of the trading of people for labor that built the city of Providence, of the vibrancy of the current local creative community, and of urban renewal's decimation of communities in Providence as they did across the country. The site of the installation was in a new park created after the removal of I-95 highway, a highway that acted like many others across the country, ripping apart underserved communities. How can one site tell the truth about the dispossession of the Narragansett in the founding of Providence, one of the oldest cities in our union? We decided that we could not. We cannot tell in a single monument the full stories of all the lives of all the people who contributed in ways big and small to Providence. But what we could do is create a place of exchange for the siloed neighborhoods rooted in the history of the place. So we began with a process of excavation to begin to unearth the truths of the intertwined histories still present in the land, understanding that that land, that ground, holds many layers of truths covered up throughout the year. We started by recognizing the historic trails of the Native nations, the Pequot, the Wampanoag, and the Narragansett, who connected on this land as they passed from their communities into others. We asked, how can we create a similar place of exchange? Understanding that enclaves are actually often spaces that provide protection, while promoting people leaving their neighborhoods to bring their full self to this new space, connect to other residents, then take that exchange back to their neighborhoods, the fruits of the exchange. Community workshops would yield the names of community members and historical figures that different communities felt connected to. So they would decide whose names should be a part of this landmark. These would get etched into the excavated ground, which would form the base for the installation. The raised metal ribbons, etched with "We are here, we are still here," weave to create a space of gathering, sitting, performing, and hanging out. So the open call for the Harriet Tubman Monument came in my email inbox a few times. So the first time I ignored it because I assumed that they were looking for a figurative artist, one who would do a representative sculpture pretty traditionally. It was sent to me again by Amanda Williams, class of '97, who encouraged me to respond, saying that understanding that the discourse around monuments was changing. I knew that whatever my entry would look like, it had to grapple with community building in public space. In her book, Bound for the Promised Land, Kate Larson writes that Harriet Tubman was driven by her desire to liberate her family and friends, guided by an unquestioning belief in God's protection and confident in the vast underground network she had come to know so well. These secret networks were built in the antebellum equivalents to public space: markets, horse races, and revival camp meetings. The enslaved journeyed miles to hear the messages of hope amongst biblical texts that was different to those of obedience that they heard at the churches of their masters. Shadow of a Face was designed as a similar place of pilgrimage. People will visit the monument from all corners of Newark. They will come to learn about Harriet Tubman and to connect with her. And in the process, they will connect with themselves and get one step closer to their own liberation from whatever weight they might be carrying. When they come, they will find a place that is welcoming, with benches that encourage them to sit and stay. There were several things that I was considering in working through the design process. So one is that it's important that Harriet Tubman's profile in the monument was larger than life. It sits in a park that has monuments to several other people, and she needs to take up space. She needs to be seen from far away. She needs to be elevated to her rightful place of honor as we give due praise to her achievements, not only as a conductor in the Underground Railroad, but also as a Union spy, cook, a suffragette, and a humanitarian for other Black causes. But we can never fully know her. Much of the stories of the enslaved died with them. We find traces of them in runaway notices. Nor should we ever elevate our heroes such that they are not understood as being human. It is in their humanity that we see ourselves. Harriet Tubman's profound sense of loneliness upon crossing over the line into freedom without her family speaks to the universal need for connection. So, though we lift her up in the monument, we also connect with her as her face appears on one of the walls at eye level. We see our face in hers. Her face is made up of a mosaic of large pieces. The pieces create a texture that encourages touch. The texture of the mosaic is repeated at a different scale at the ground and the inner walls, using ceramic pieces, each etched with the story of a different Newark resident to be collected in workshops. The mosaics reinforce that this is a monument for the community, by the community, and that Harriet's story is their story. It also adds to the multisensory experience of the monument. The second wall is a learning wall. Text on the outside highlights important dates in Harriet Tubman's life, and text on the inside highlights stories of Black liberation struggles in Newark and throughout New Jersey. A bridge between Harriet's story and our own. Lastly, her cloak is made up of a metal frame and wrought iron sinews that mimic the network while signifying protection. The circle provides the groundwork out of which all the forms grow. It directs the labyrinthine movement while referencing cosmograms of African and African American traditions, connecting us to our ancestors and to our descendants across space and time. The circle is broken only by the footprint of the old Columbus statue. When people come, they will find a place that is welcoming, with benches that encourage them to sit and stay. It will be a place of performance, a place of learning, and a place of protest. Community engagement workshops are currently underway as we move through community centers, libraries, and schools, describing the project to the people of Newark and collecting their stories, those etched into tiles, along with audio stories to be included in the monument. This is one more tool in promoting a connection to the physical space of the monument once it is completed in the fall. I just want you to hear a few of the
32 years old, and now I've been living in Newark for 2 years now.
I'm 57 years old. I've been living in Newark for a year now. I've lived all over the United States, but this is the first place I feel like I'm home.
And I was born and raised in South Carolina. Cory Booker, Cory Booker attracted me to Newark.
Okay.
I am 54 years old or young, and I have been living in Newark for, 15 years, I believe.
And I'm from Newark. I grew up in Newark, and no matter where I go, I always end up back in the home place. I'm 70 years old.
So the project has been supported by the Mellon Foundation as part of their Humanities in Place program to expand the historical content into the museum and library, which both abut the park, and into the Newark Public School curriculum. Audible is also an important partner in integrating the audio content that we're collecting into the physical experience of the monument. So throughout this entire trajectory of my studio practice, teaching has played an important role in keeping me engaged with the critical issues and in innovative practice. I also bring the work I do in my practice into the architecture design studios. So last spring, I challenged my students at Columbia to engage with the same Jamaican community in the Bronx in the service of creating public spaces that support cultural expression. They grounded their own research in the place through historical research, multiple site visits, in the people through cultural research and sessions with different community members, and in the issues through reading and discussing theoretical text on public space, immigration, nostalgia, memory, and belonging. They were directed to understand it as a formal spatial investigation as much as it was a social justice project, as they were creating physical spaces that would be occupied by real people who have strong social and cultural ways of interacting with each other in space. So these were just a sampling of those projects. This one kind of took over the backyards of the townhouses in that space. This one really investigated the roles of churches in helping people transition as immigrants into a new place. And this one looked at elevating hair braiding as part of a cultural arts space. And in my work on the Harriet Tubman Monument in Newark, New Jersey has inspired the current studio I'm teaching at Columbia. The challenge is to engage issues of fugitivity and memory through research on the Underground Railroad and the new sanctuary movement. The common thread between the past and the present being exploitative labor practices in agriculture. The same exploitative labor practices that supported slavery are supporting exploitation of immigrants today. These students will design spaces of memory and sanctuary on the archaeological site of a small free Black community in Hyde Park in Hudson Valley. There aren't enough built spaces that make visible the full spectrum of history. In creating these spaces that acknowledge that we've always been here, we create that sense of belonging that I'm trying to create in public architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for an excellent presentation. And last but not least, Arthur Huang. Also coming back to Cornell, Arthur is a graduate from 2001, as he just told me. Arthur is a structural engineer, architect, and leader in circular economy innovation with Miniwis. Is that the right pronunciation? I butchered the other one. Sorry, Laurie. A trash material technology company he started in 2005. The mission of Miniwis is to upcycle decades of single-use environmental pollution into a sustainable smart building solution of the future. Arthur's Miniwis team leapfrogs existing technology and empowers a circular economy for all communities. Miniwis technology platform captures the value of single-use plastic, metal, glass through decentralized waste transformation machines to convert industrial and household waste into sustainable building materials, building modules, specialty fabrics, designing furniture and fixtures. After 2 decades of innovation focusing on impactful upcycling technologies powered by a multinational, multidisciplinary team, Miniwis is now offering its modular infrastructure as an ESG specialty contractor to the global market to make circular concepts into physical reality. Miniwis' upcycling experimental products have already been implemented in over 300,000 square meters of commercial retail, hotels, and offices across major international cities. Under Arthur's leadership, Miniwis has received numerous international invention patents in manufacturing processes and mechanical assemblies to enable circular consumption. Arthur was recognized by various international institutions, including the World Economic Forum's Technology Pioneer Award, Obama's Emerging Leader, the Financial Times Earth Award, and the Wall Street Journal's Asia Innovation Award. Arthur has been a National Geographic Emerging Explorer since 2016, and the World Economic Forum recognized him as the runner-up for the Circular Leadership Award 2019 in Davos. In February 2019, the World Economic Forum named Miniwiz as one of the top 11 companies leading the way to a circular economy. Please help me invite Arthur to the stage.
Okay, I knew this would happen. I don't see the adapter for the HDMI. You know, mine's really old, so no, it doesn't even have a. Wow. Okay, so this might be. Yeah. So. It's like one of.
So it's USB to HDMI.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a USB. That's okay. Since no one's here, it's kind of cool that I can just be quite free. So while someone's trying to find adapter, I don't know where it went, but maybe I was just too nervous being back to school. I was actually, anyways, I want to thank Caroline and especially Lily and many of my old professors who kind of part of the committee and invited me back. I think they all know me as kind of a little bit naughty when I was here because I used to have a lot of bad parties. And I don't know if you guys have been to Rome yet. Who has been to Rome yet? Can you guys rent motorinos or can you guys rent boats? No. You know why? That was because of me. Because I bought a whole motorino when I was in Rome. And then I was taking to go around, partying at night. And then we were renting fishing boats. We were having a lot of fun. And anyone else driving? Hey? Coming up. Wow, awesome. Yes. Yeah, this one. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I don't have to keep talking. All right, but almost everything you see I wear, including my shoes, has some story in it. Okay, and most of the fabric or whatever I wear is all made by my company. Okay, so and maybe you go to Nike stores. Some of the products are actually already made with our material, and so. I know there's some. I know this sounds very strange that an architect is, or from an architecture learning is doing it, and I have to attribute that to this environment. This is kind of beautiful environment where many of these strange skills matriculate, and I don't think I have this. I do have a lot of immigrant experience, but. I just look past it, I think, and then I think I have a bigger problem at hand because this is probably the first time I say in public I'm actually dyslexic. This is a new term, right? So I actually could not read until I'm 32, and I hide it very well when I was in Cornell. So who else here could not read any of the theory books? Yeah? So, okay. So just imagine when Val is talking about all these crazy books, I never read them, by the way. I couldn't, actually. So how do I get past SATs, for example? I have a horrible score. I still remember you write a name, I think it's already 360. My scores are so bad, and Cornell accepted me like someone like that, you know? Structural problems, when you have a math problem, even though I'm good at math, if you have a problem in English, I just can't understand the problem. Okay, that was my own struggle, okay? But somehow, I have amazing classmates. So what I did very well, I think, is I take very good notes. In class, when people talk about what they read, when people talk about I copy it down, okay? And that became my 30-page, 60-page dissertation, whatever you want. And then actually, just that one sentence repeated by my different classmates, and I just copy them 30 times, like 30 pages times, you know? Like, it's just that, and then surprisingly, sorry, I don't think any professor actually read those papers, yeah? Okay. So, for some reason, I think I have pretty good grades, yeah? I have really good grades, supposedly. I got by. But I think one of my class has a huge issue when I was a student here. One, it was the biggest debate of AutoCAD or no AutoCAD. Remember, like, I think I still remember, was the huge debate, digitalization or analog. And that was our time. I think I chose my thesis to be only analog because I say, oh, yeah, everybody is doing like digital stuff. If I don't draw everything by hand, make everything by hand for one last time, I will never have a chance. I think I was right. Yeah, okay. Yesterday, I went into the shop. I was so excited. Oh, I see robots, CNC machines. I see the metal shops. I used to be a lab assistant, the shop assistant. I used to also be the structure TA for 2 years. Yeah. So you can see I'm like geeky side already. Yeah. But nobody was in the shop, or at least it's closing time. But it looks super clean. All the machines, robot looks like it's never been used before. So I was just like, wow, all this possibility that's happening here. By the way, I duplicated Cornell, this learning experience, the studio spaces, and the lab in Taipei. Exactly the same, almost the same size, okay? The lab, at least, the factories. So we're able to make lots of things, almost everything. I have built a lot of buildings already. All our buildings are built in the lab, actually. So just imagine you're doing that in scale. And you can do that already, today, here in our lab. And of course, it has to pass lots of certification, all that stuff. All right, okay. So that's it for now, but I want to, I will go to the presentation, but I want to explain one last thing is there's a turning point where I all of a sudden opened my eye. It was in here in Cornell, but not Ithaca, actually. It was in Rome, our Rome program. Okay, and I want to share with you how that Rome program really kind of all of a sudden click everything. Like I think Lily can testify. I would just like hang around, but I just really don't know what I'm doing. I still remember the first studio, Lily was actually my professor in freshman year. She said, I should not be an architect. Yes, she did. Yeah, and then there was like she said, I should not be an architect. I should just be a graphic designer. Yeah, and then, yeah. So I was going to make you like super embarrassed, but I mean, it was true though, okay? But I really appreciate that because that really, like, I mean, he's like, that's not space. That's not architecture. Okay, I still remember, like, you know, what I was doing. It was very graphic, but I understand. I totally get it now. And then I love the fact that there is a whole group of professors, Andrea, John, they're like, you know, Val, they're all sticking to the gun, making sure we actually execute on a physical level, on top of all this stuff. And then really, who cares what you end up having? at the end, it's that experience that really counts. And Rome, I just want to show you a video. Recently, okay, sorry. Yes, it's this one. Does that work? Yeah, okay, I see it now. Uh-oh, it's not mirror image again. Do you guys see that? Nope. Okay, shit. System preference. You can see system preference? No. Huh? Yeah, Going Circular is a movie that recently launched, but because of a licensing issue, it's okay, forget it, don't worry, forget it. If you guys want to watch a movie, welcome to go to curiositystream.com. We recently launched a movie called Going Circular. Basically, there's 4 protagonists. It's talking about what is going circular mean. And I think we're one of them, and I definitely says a lot of good things about Cornell there. So, and I attribute to a lot of this to Rome. Sorry, I just need to mirror the screen, yeah? So let me mirror the screen.
It looks good. It looks fine.
What do you mean? But it's not mirrored.
It looks fine up there.
Yeah, no, but that is not playing because it's in 2 files. I just need to mirror the screen. Oh, okay, got it. All right, you guys see that now? Yeah. All right, hopefully the sound works too. So it's a long movie, so you don't have to watch the long format, just to give you a short form.
This is something that we used to know and we've forgotten in our quest for modernity.
When I was studying architecture in Cornell, we have a privilege of being in Rome to study for a semester or a year. I was here with one of my favorite professors teaching us about archaeology. We are in Augustus Forum. The Forum is actually offices. Next to it is a market, literally like a shopping mall where different goods are being traded. It's very interesting when you see these walls when they are open, especially when they're in ruin form. You get the stone on the outside, and then you got a brick layer, and in the middle, literally, you have everything that's like discarded inside the wall. You can see like there's part of a roof, some sort of tiles, clay pipes, any type of like leftover bricks or leftover materials just being poured into this middle cavity. On top of that, the decorative marble. They are actually very expensive wallpaper, okay, on top of a pile of crap.
as a student. It was a very eye-opening. Any buildings you open up, the walls is full of trash. They are actually taking down their old house and putting it into their new house. They're reusing their stones, they're reusing the pavement, they're reusing all the columns, but they're still creating beauty, lasting beauty. They are actually a lot more advanced than our system right now. They are actually circular by nature. All the material are collected within literally meters. Living the current economy, I take, I consume, I dispose. But if you look at everything as a circular system, everything makes sense.
Anyways, you guys can look at the thing. They need to make some money from all that money they spend on us. But in short, what we have been developing is a set of machineries to do buildings with trash. And I have to say, we've been trying to do this for so long. Look, since I graduated from Harvard, and then the thesis, my thesis is about the nature. It's about biomimicry, taking the local material to be able to use, and that thesis is still going on. I still remember when I was doing the thesis presentation, all the professors just say, stop talking. Yeah, Arthur, you don't make sense, yeah? And then just let the work speak for itself. Because just imagine someone who's really bad at English, why do you want to hear him talk? But there's one amazing medium that architecture education offers us. It's able to offer us to use your hand and actually physically show something, your abstract idea of what you want to do. It's either through drawings, either through any form. But anyway, so I have lots of models, and I definitely produce very fast. And I just want to say one sad thing also during my year. It's not only a digital transformation year, it's also where all the architects, the best smartest students in my class all became bankers. Do you guys, has anyone become bankers recently? And the reason why I dress like that is because all my friends dress like this. We're not in black. We can't because people think you're a designer and they don't take you seriously. Yeah, I'm serious. In the banking world, they don't take you seriously, but they're all bankers. Raymond, Terrence. Yeah, this is Lily's students. All became bankers. I'm not saying anything bad about Lily, but by the way, why does people want to be banker anyways? Yeah, it's only because they feel like they are not good enough. They need to actually have some financial securities, and on top, they want to influence more, right? So influence more. I think that's the little bit difference between. I also agree with my colleagues, actually. I don't want to be some rich people's hand to help them to build their dream home. I don't care about their dream home. I want to be the one who make the difference. So in order for you to be the one who make the difference, you have to start a company that become billions of dollars so you can make a difference. So that's what we did. So there's a huge shift in trend right now, okay? And I forgave all my pretty building stuff that we built throughout the year. I don't want to talk about buildings. I just want to talk about what is actually necessary, the tool you need to learn today. That is super important for the next 50 decades or whatever decades, if we have an Earth still left, okay? And this urgency for me has become more and more and more. And I call it, these days there's a term called ESG, but the global trend is there's a policy shift, there's a new generation, and there's an accounting trend shift. Because of this accounting trend shift, all of a sudden now people can audit your accountant will be able to audit whether your design is good or not for the environment. If you are not familiar with this new language, you are you're screwed for the rest of your life, really, because no one will value whatever stuff you design. Because right now, the present urgencies is the war, then it's COVID. How do we get to COVID? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, but think about it. If you're going to devote, that's what I was thinking when I started the company, when I was writing the thesis. There's only one thing that really matters. It's like, what, and then I was thinking about what is the fiduciary duty of an architect, of a global citizens, of a local citizens, of a human being. It's actually your environment. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. And you need to create a fairer culture in between while you are trying to create a nicer environment, okay? And this, I just give you a summary of what ESG is. E is environment. So what is it based on? It's based on ISO 14040. It's based on carbon footprint analysis. It's based on LCA analysis, life cycle assessments. And what's interesting is, you know what's the #1 global footprint in the world? Architecture, 39%. Plus 2% alone is cement. Look at how much cement we have in here, yeah? So you think this is a green building? And what's interesting is building material. Within the building sector, what is the highest carbon footprint in the building sector? Look at that number, 90 to 10. When you talk about LED lights, solar panels, those are operational, lowering carbon footprint. The real problem is the material you choose to build with, 90% embedded footprints. So if you are not looking at that problem, you cannot make the world drastically reduce carbon footprint, period. No matter how much energy or how much electric car you drive over here, it's not even close to the way how you design a building. If you think we're here to learn a trade, I really think we're looking at the problem a little bit strange. Recently, I said this thing in public. I said, architect is trying to solve the world with proportion, solve the world's problem with proportions and curvatures, okay? But in reality, there's a lot of more pressing issues we need to deal with. But first of all, you have to develop a good way of looking at judging your work. The second thing is S and G on the ESG. This is actually exactly what previous presenter was talking about. It's literally about a fairer society. And also it's about placemaking. So just think about a fair society where you have a governance able to make sure this fair society is fair. Okay, and there is a set of indexes that's published by the UN 30 years ago. Okay, and till this day it's called Sustainable Development Goal 17. Okay, it has a checklist. So every project, you can actually go through that, ask yourself the same exact questions. Is it gender parity? Is this? Is this? Just keep asking. Just keep asking your question. Then right away, you know how you score. Okay, this is the way how the finance people are judging us these days. So this is very important. If you want to build anything, this is going to be. And here's a little video of what I say about myself.
We want to matter. We want to matter to the non-toxic future of our world. We want to matter to the sustainability of our community. At Miniwiz, it is our mission to change consumer behavior into a circular one. It is the only way for us as a species to sustainably consume our limited resources. Overconsumption is a complex system problem. There is no single miracle cure. We want to matter by proving human consumption can be satiated with our very own trash. We have dedicated ourselves to turning decades of environmental pollution into solutions that will enable us to live sustainably. We want to matter, so we turn ourselves into magicians of trash, inventing new ways of transforming our everyday trash into high-performance works of art. We turn milk packaging into the hottest sportswear fashion, plastic bottles into luxurious textile, cigarette butts into furnitures and glasses, using fashion and apparel waste into luxurious home furnishings, masks, PPE into cell phone chargers, single-use medical waste material into hospitals, using smart AI technology to make decentralized recycling, upcycling possible today.
We head to Taiwan for this report, a company designing solutions to overcome a mounting problem of a mountain of trash. From furniture to hospital wards, all built from waste, one CEO is on a mission to revolutionize recycling.
His team has used waste to develop over 1,200 different materials for use in construction, a company turning different kinds of waste, like plastic bottles, into materials for buildings and products across the world.
We want to matter, but unfortunately we are out of time. Please join us in upcycling today's local pollution into circular ESG building solutions of the future.
Okay. So I think architects are always really bad at summarizing what they do in a very condensed way. Miniwiz is an impact-driven innovation company that developed waste-based substitute for high-performance, durable product. Basically, we are a substitute for whatever you're using that you see in this room. Okay. Where we're heading, we're targeting real estate development with government net zero carbon emission goals. And I don't want to go through the whole project. We have built a lot, from hospitals to everything, so you kind of see the summary. But recently, we have made a huge move in collaborating with the government on a large scale. And so the building is getting bigger. It's getting like billion level. And so you're like, oh, so what do you guys actually do? You know, previously we were architects, engineers, and contractor combined into one. We call it the turnkey, yeah? And now we are actually turning into the actual developer with the developers. But of course, government with government. So hopefully I can help or get some of the idea that we came up here and use many of the ideas that you guys have. And this is a summary of what are the next generation of technologies must needed. I make it very simple into ABC. One is circular engineering services. Right now, I think this is one of the biggest missing link, and I think in Cornell, you can be perfectly situated and experiment with this, okay? Unfortunately, every school I went to don't know what the hell they were talking about. They don't even have someone like Felix and they don't even have someone like Felix in their school. So every time I want to talk about what is ESG engineering or design work, nobody understands. Second, we need to have lots of modular eco-building product. Everyone has this modular building hype, right? In the future, everything must be manufactured in a modular way. That's the only way to quickly increase the durability of our product and reduce the carbon footprint. And in the same time, all that building products should all be made from trash. And what we are doing right now is the most pressing, which is the upcycling technology machines. You just need the machines. You just need the machines to be able to turn all that trash locally and transform that directly into building material. And by the way, this is architects are also really bad at this. It's called value chain, okay? If we are building anything, we're in a value chain. We're in a set of logic how these things are being built. So a real estate life cycle value chain, It goes from feasibility, acquisition, design, sales, construction, all the way to demolition. And we, in the design school and the engineering school, we're only talking about design, correct? So you're asking somebody to come to you. That's why all the architects are just attention grabbing. They just want to make themselves into some sort of god or some sort of like a meta guy, right? Because that's how people get attracted to, oh, how are you better than the other guy? But at the end, you're just building some roof over somebody's head. That's really simple, actually. So that's why, if you're just focusing on the design, that is a huge problem. I think you're not missing the real opportunity that's offering here in Cornell. C, you see that this upcycling infrastructure ecosystem needs to be spread actually across this whole value chain. Now A, which is the design engineering services, has to go in directly from the feasibility study. If you're going to have any green building type of project in the future, by the way, Lee is a sham, okay? It's a way of selling more air conditioning. So if you're a Lee AP, please don't do it, yeah? Because you need to get from the feasibility side. From the feasibility side, you are able to spec in all the right material, all the right social balancing act of doing that, okay? And B, which is building material, that's how we make most of our money anyways. So to be able to produce these products at scale without glue and can be replaced and extend their life cycle and at a certain performance that match every performance goal from fire, sound insulation to assemblability. And we think the future and this is what we're implementing is basically CAB, or this is basically from a hub, and we spread out our machines from non-movable to movable machines to create instant upcycling ecosystem. And we are doing that currently in Singapore, and we already have that in Taiwan, and we are spreading that to Singapore, Middle East, and Europe. So let me quickly explain to you what C, what A, and what B is, so you have an idea what are the tools and capability you need to develop in Cornell. So I start with A, yeah? A, LCA integrations. This is LCA is life cycle analysis. So you have to look at the whole material cycle from the input all the way to output. And this is all already standardized for carbon trading based on ISO 14040. And all the building we built, we do a third-party accreditations on carbon footprint, SiO2, and nitrogen. So how much carbon footprint does this building compare to a traditional building material of that same location? SiO2 is air pollution, and nitrogen is water pollution. So if you don't, on the most basic level, if you do not consider these environmental footprint, then you actually don't know what's the cost of your design to the environment. On the design engineering side, there's two ways of dealing with this. So you can think about it in two ways. One is B2B. B2B is using the existing system to integrate the existing system into what you want to do. So for example, from local waste collectors, all the way to local collectors to material supplier, and in between, this is where Meaningless inject its knowledge. So where we put in software and technology and different patents. And there's a red line, which is the B2C side, which is direct to consumer. So we want to be able to directly take the material. This is the lowest footprint possible, because just imagine you finish that bottle of water, you can turn that directly into a building block, and that already making that building on site. So that is the lowest carbon footprint by far. And so we are scaling the red line. We have always been doing the green line, and now we are scaling the red line. And this is all I really wanted to show to to the students here. And I don't see too many real students here. So it's mostly colleagues and professors. But I think this is very important for the next generation of students to be able to do that. And this is how we do design now. And this took us about 10 years to get to this level. So this is a video of just a summary of how we do design now, but you would think it's kind of strange compared to how we do design here in Cornell. Okay, now moving. Basically, that's a live display as you're drawing, yeah? And if you have that software, I mean, it's just like right now I can go to a crit. I could just say, you're really bad for the environment, sorry, yeah? And just I zoom down, so give you a summary. This is a typical phone charger, Belkin's, 10 watt. This is the one that we make directly from the trash we collected from people. And then 3 minutes per cycle, and this is a carbon footprint. And just, that is, we made 40,000 units, and that is already basically equivalent of planting 6,500 trees. Just that one tiny thing. So if you don't think that's important, I don't know what you think is important. So another thing is, of course, if you put that into architecture, it's really crazy amount. It randomly, you just put in a building of a shopping mall, it's like 2.2 million trees a year for a life cycle of 10 years. This is crazy. Anyways, so I want to show you what B is, right? The modules. So you can take construction waste, agricultural waste, aluminum, glass, plastic, textile, fashion, and you can turn that into all kinds of architectural material. I have a bag of materials. Welcome for you guys to play with. So yeah, how that can be implemented with all the certification already passed into different type of building projects. This is a hotel we built in Beijing next to American School. It has a set of 6 buildings from the exterior to interiors for the furnitures. They're all made with trash. I don't know if you guys know what TSMC is. Do you guys know what TSMC is? Wow. Okay, but everybody has a TSMC products. You just don't know it. And I think that's the why Taiwan is thought of as the scariest place or the most dangerous place on earth. That's according to economists. Because, you know, all your electric cars, missile-guided system, it's all made by this company called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor. It's one of the biggest building in the world, biggest company in the world. It is top 10 for however many years. And we're not like the Koreans that likes to put a brand on something. And I think Taiwan is always, because very low key, they always try to hide behind somebody, okay? And there's top 10 company. There are 2 top 10 company is from Taiwan, just so you know the scale. And a lot of people say, oh, where's Taiwan? Taiwan is like Thailand. Oh, great, thank you. And then, I mean, very cool. Thailand is super cool. But I'm just saying, there's people still confuse Taiwan with Thailand. And people still think Taiwan is a third world country. Or Taiwan is, anyways, there's a lot of problem with China right now, but it's always been a problem with China, right? But I'm just saying, this is actually using the production waste of all the semiconductors to make the facade for their new factory. And we did that many times over for different type of projects. Taipei mayors, like residents, a lot of these big construction projects that we're in. So all the pictures except the glass and the, most of the stuff is made by Miniwis in module form. I want to highlight what we did in the pandemic. We built a hospital with medical waste. It's a module. By the way, the black, I don't really care what that is. It can be 2x4s, doesn't matter. But the system, it's okay. Just the system, basically, the pod allow you to expand and to create these pneumatically sealed medical system. And this is actually a negative pressure room. We can also do surgery room. This is made from recycled aluminum and recycled polypropylene and recycled polyethylene. Ethylene is your plastic bag. Polypropylene is your mask. And then aluminum can, which we do drink quite a lot, beer cans. And this is the ICU room, a smart ICU room. We have 93 of them. And then, so during pandemic, we are the only one who actually got the hospital built because nobody can get the parts. The global trade shuts down. So we are the only one who can actually build something on site. So imagine you're collecting the material on site, you're building a hospital on site. And I know it doesn't look super pretty for a lot of you, but all that modules can be duplicated into different usage. So right away, we turn that into a post-pandemic classroom for National Taiwan University. So all this is antibacterial coating. Some is with silver, some is with oyster shell, oyster calcium carbonate. Oyster calcium carbonate is actually naturally antibacterial, antiviral. And we also are building luxurized senior home, right, using the same system. It's exactly the same system, it's just different color. And we're also building dormitory with the same system. Just one pattern, guys, one pattern. It can scale into different applications. And by the way, the material by default, everything's made from trash already. So, okay, so the last part I want to show you guys is C. And I think there's a potential here in Cornell. Most of our learning here is about the software, right? It's about the design thinking, it's about the way how you execute connecting. But if you can play with the machine, which requires a set of codes, seriously, I think that's also definitely the future. So you have to be able to, I saw the robotic arm I got in our shop. I was super excited. So I was asking Nolan, anyone using those robotic arm? Anyone using the CNC? By the way, that shop looks exactly like our lab. Yeah. So I was like, oh, it's so cool. I was like, are you guys using that? They said, no. Huh? Okay. By the way, when you're using it, normally it doesn't look like that because you will have so much cables outside from it. You need to code a lot of subsequent tools to be able to make a system works. So it looks like it's very manicure at the moment. So I would just like, wow, is it new, brand new? So I suggest you use any chance to play with those machines, to get familiar. You don't have to be an expert, just get familiar, because eventually this is something that we all need to do. And so basically we did this thing, we went to Tibet, we collected trash, from 4,500 meters next to the Himalayan base camp, okay, where all the trash, plastic trash from all the climbers, and we're turning that into schools with the machine and with solar power. And we are turning that into a more modular version, and that we are scaling that into different cities. And we have 3 phases. The first phase is the tiny robot, and then it's and every cycle has to produce a certain dollar amount of a product able to sustain that system. And just to quickly let you see that this system is like the latest one is in Sweden, Stockholm, at the train station. So we have like 7 of these units running around the world, and we're going to scale to around 30 to 40 of these around the different cities. So we also park one at Monaco. I don't know if you guys know where Monaco is, but it's a very fancy rich people place where there's lots of yachts. And then we have another one in Sardinia, Porto Cevo. I don't know if you guys know that either, but it's basically taking the ocean cleanup and you turn that into new building material. And so this is just a video of how it turned into building material. By the way, I made all the video myself, just so you know. That's why it's like using standard sound, really shitty, but it's okay. I think it gets a point across. By the way, these video takes like 5 minutes to make with your iPhone. So this is a tiling system that, and so the new hub is able to take fabric waste and plastic waste, and you are able to go through different type of processes and transformation machines, and then you can be able to create all kinds of final product with a high value. And these are modularized into 20-foot containers. This is the size and scale of a machine. And this is where I'm going to Singapore right after this, is to build the lab in Singapore. And we are building at this BIG's fancy 70-story style tower. The lobby will be made from this trash, yeah? And with this set of machines. So the machine is right, this National Design Center is right next to that building. So there's almost zero footprint in terms of transportation. What we did with Eileen Fisher, I don't know if you guys know Eileen Fisher. She has a little factories. Little is really like, it's in upstate, it actually on Westchester. And basically we're turning fabric waste into this. So beautiful tapestry, this can go on forever. It's just a needle to punch machine with a series of reinforcement, ultrasonic, heat rollers, and you're able to make, these can be forever long, okay? And so you can use waste, fashion waste, and you could create beautiful textile for clothing, for carpets, pillows, any type of architecture fixture, and you can make chairs. These chairs are actually being pressed like that, just with that same machine. And we built a fashion store without fashion in Paris, in Le Marais. It's just it's a failed project. I have a couple of bankrupt company on my belt, so this is one of them. So we thought it's a good idea to make a fashion store without fashion, but at the end, it's a business model that doesn't work. So all this is fashion waste, but we may turn fashion waste into hangers, into furnitures. And yeah, any type of fashion waste into chairs. This is for VF Group. By the way, all our projects are executed, and this is New York, 6th Avenue, New York headquarters, Nike's headquarters. All the ceiling panels and wall panels are by this company called Miniwiz. And I got threatened by the labor union because we designed a system without using screw. For those who are in the building trade, yeah, I think you would know what I'm talking about, the darker side of architecture. But I think it makes sense. They explained to me people are depending on this contract. How am I going to send my kids to Syracuse University or Cornell University? Okay, so this is a very, they just pushed me to the side and gave me a long talk, maybe with a gun on their pocket, but it's okay. That's just the way how the world works. And bank headquarters, lobbies, etc. This is with Raymond Kwok. It's also one of my classmates who turns to the banker. Sometimes he introduced me to many of our real estate developers. And so this is one of a project that we are doing for a big shopping mall for the old Hong Kong airport. This is working with Stoneheader. By the way, we work with Ramco House, we work with OMA, we work with Zaha Hadid as a specialty contractor. We do work with architects a lot. This is with Stoneheader, as a very famous Norwegian architect of these days. They want to have a tapestry wallpaper, 3D wallpaper, across the whole shopping mall that looks like copper patina, but not yet turns into green. So they have a specific moment in time of copper they want to capture. Please, if you're architects, please do not sink yourself to that level. That is not how you should devote your intellectual resources for this type of discussion. Yeah, I know it's important to some people, but you know how many samples we did? It's just it's too much blue, too little red, and this require 60 email threads. Yeah, okay, and so please, that's not what we're here for. And that's it. The last thing is, I just want to show you we recently are on the news. We're on the, because we recently did this.
Created a lot of medical. Pandemic has created a lot of medical waste. Now a company in Taiwan is taking cues from a Pixar movie to help repurpose some of that trash. Tina Krause has a story from London.
Scenes like this of pollution from the pandemic scattered on streets and clogging oceans got engineer Arthur Huang thinking.
This can be a mask today. It can be completely something else tomorrow.
His company, MiniWiz, is giving old face masks a new life, recycling them into wireless phone chargers.
His name is Wally.
Taking inspiration from Hollywood's Wall-E robot who was left to clean up a dirty planet, Huang created Trashpresso, a solar-powered recycling machine aiming to do the same. The robotic device shreds medical masks, heats them up, and turns them into a sort of plastic dough.
These plastic waste, especially the mask, is actually almost 100% made from plastic. It's polypropylene based.
All that plastic creates a hard shell, which is made into a wireless charger using electronic parts.
This is a function that everyone needs or everyone wants, especially during the pandemic.
Bank executive Cindy Lin saw her recycling efforts pay off after asking employees to hand over their used masks. She says we collected around 10,000 of them, and they were converted into colorful phone chargers as gifts for everyone. One charger is made every 3 minutes, in a venture Huang hopes will inspire others around the world to use their energy to make a difference. Tina Krause, CBS News.
All right. So that's it. Sorry for the rambling. Thank you.
This is on? Yes, it's on. So apparently we have really amazing refreshments outside, and they're going to pack up and leave if we don't get there soon. So we had this amazing list of questions and really kind of, pontificating about, you saw us all scribbling about this amazing presentation. But I'm thinking that within the time left, it's actually better for the audience to ask you questions. I mean, I would just say that was I guess, if I could take credit for Lori's, but Lori's, proximity, but I can't take credit for any of you. But the point that if our presenters offer us a vision of the future, what they all do in common is to suggest that the site of architecture must be expanded, to the extent that, we talk about architecture being about space, and space being about something in between two visual things. In a sense, a space is a kind of relational space, a relational condition. And you're all saying that we're responsible, whether we enunciate and are explicit about it, we're responsible for what we bring together, who and what we bring into relationship. And I think all three of you have spoken about the fact that, to be incognizant of who or what we bring into relationship or not bring into relationship, we're already being active and being sort of culpable, right? So we're creating even if we're not conscious of what we're creating. So, all three of our speakers have expanded that set of relationship, asking us to both broaden the site, but also then the most sort of taking into account also the most immediate site, the everyday, the bodily, the trash, the detritus, as well as the broader institutional systemic problems, and actually setting the work of building into a longer time frame to rebuild and correct and redirect our social, cultural, and our material conditions. So thank you so much for that. And I was gonna ask a question about, if you could name one thing that we do in architecture education that's correct, and one thing that we don't do correctly, what it would be. But I'm gonna put that aside and maybe open it up for the audience in case, that'll be the backup question, the default question, if nobody would prefer to talk about something else. So please. Yes. Kurt. Yeah. I have it here.
I don't think you need a microphone. This is pretty well insulated.
Oh, yeah. Hi, thank you so much for your presentations. I was really struck in since each of you were sharing not only your work, but different models of practice, it seemed that in each case, collaboration was important to your work. And I was just wondering if you could reflect on your understanding of the role of collaboration in your work, whether it's political, social, maybe even economic.
Well, I'll start. I think for me, collaboration just brings really different ways of looking at the same opportunity. And in so doing, really creating a kind of richer result, ultimately. I find that when I work alone, oftentimes it really helps the development of whatever I'm working on to just reach out to any of the people in my network and just kind of bounce ideas off them. And in that same way, when I'm working collaboratively, whether it is co-designing with someone and really going back and forth, brainstorming, the development and the advancement and the possibilities for whatever the project is I'm working on are so much richer. And I really see it not only in terms of design, but also working with fabricators, craftsmen, people who have expertise in different areas, also really valuing that expertise and understanding the role of the different trades and craftspeople in really bringing to life these spaces that we're kind of dreaming up really make a huge difference.
I think much of what I do has been in reaction to how I was educated. So there's a critique there. And I was in architecture school, both undergrad and grad, where everything was singular. There were no collaborative projects. period, across the board in my entire education. And when I got into practice, like more conventional practice, you never work alone. There was always other people, pardon?
We collaborate.
Well, we collaborated, yes, but that was after school. So there was such a distinction between how I was educated and then what you do out in the world. And so I don't want to work by myself. I mean, I may write by myself, but I don't work by myself. I find far more energy and exchange of ideas when I'm in conversation and working with people. So I seek collaboration. I have no desire to do this alone. And in fact, I think it allows far more possibilities because I do collaborate and I seek people out. I don't wait around. Like I am actively pursuing people to work with, communities to engage, what have you. So it's very much I guess in opposition to my training, so to speak, as an architect.
Do you notice that on every interview, I never call myself an architect? I call myself an engineer. Engineers solve problems with someone else. I really hate the word architects. I actually make fun of the word architects all the time. My thesis called Nature of Architects is actually, anyways, I won't go into that. But so the nature is when you want to solve a problem, you need a lot of people's help. So this is very practical. Okay, so I want to go down from the practical side, I want to go down a little bit further. I think you point out in your question is totally right. It's called economical. Yeah, when you have lots of people, when you're in the group work, what happened? There's always slackers, there's always like lame people, there's always people who's not agreeing with you. So it's hard to work collaboratively. And if you get bunch of people that's also thinking exactly the same to work together, then what's the point of collaboration? So, and there's one universal truth that I think it's called a value proposition. And so you got to really understand value, like what is your value? Like for example, what's your value to a fabricator? Why does he need to help you to bend this metal this strange way just so you can have a project, unless it's economical. Yeah, so it's money. So, but money is a lot more complicated than that. It's actually a value system. So if you understand what your value, you can use what you have. I mean, my company has gotten quite big, so it got to a certain size economically. But the problem is, you always have to start from zero, right? Nobody's beginning with a company that's worth X amount, right? It starts with zero. So it's always about trading value constantly. So if you are somebody who is a slacker in a group, will you want to work with him on the next project? No, right? So it's about the value proposition. Now, I know that for a long time since I was a shop assistant here. I don't know how many models I help people to build, and it's really annoying, actually. And yeah, but why would you want to team up with this person or ever collaborate with this person ever again? You know, when he's only using my value, right? So there's a reciprocal relationship. So I think this is a very humbling experience because by humbling yourself to look at what I can trade as a group. Maybe right now you don't know computer, but I'm trading my physical labor for you to teach me to code this, you know? So I think for me, it's all about trading. And maybe that's very transactional. That's why some people think I'm a little bit manipulative, but it's okay. That's just the way the world works.
So maybe just really quickly to build on top of that, we are talking about collaborations, but I have a question about civic engagement that you're all talking about extensively, especially Laurie and Nina. I'm wondering, Arthur maybe, but you guys can also answer this question as well. Arthur, how do you imagine the communal engagement in the future development of circular economy? I mean, you showed already an example of how people office-wide collected waste that then was transformed into something else. And Laurie and Nina talked about the practice and education and how you reach out to different communities and how important it is to collaborate with the clients, right? So I'm not talking about professionals, but doing projects and using the force and power of the society, of different collectives.
How we engage with people is actually, again, a value trading proposition. Okay, so we have a background IP, which is all the patents of a machine, the processes, material database, software. So we are, in a way, this is called background IP. I don't know if you guys in a tech world, it's called background IP. And then whatever you create with this set of kitchen tools or this cookbook, this is called foreground IP. Okay, so how we engage, and by the way, IP, a lot of people is like intellectual property, but what does intellectual property means? Intellectual property actually means money, actually, if you think about it. So if this product sells, the guy who have a foreground IP get to collect the intellectual property, get to collect the money. So how we work with, let's say, it doesn't matter with beach cleanup, doesn't matter with NGOs, doesn't matter. We actually enable these NGOs with cash, actually. But the cash is generated by their foreground IP, by them creatively come out with this tile. Okay, so now we're working with Singapore. The architect is getting charged for designing the tile. So the client is paying for them to design the tile. The contractor is being paid by the client to make the same tile. Okay, and then an NGO is responsible for collecting the material, and they are getting the money also from the product that's being produced by the system. So everybody's trading within that ecosystem. And of course, you have to make everyone worth their while, right? Otherwise, nobody does anything.
It's interesting because as you were talking, I was thinking about the transactional nature of working with communities. And I guess I haven't necessarily thought of it as so directly transactional, more trying to provide a platform for voices who aren't included or intentionally excluded to be able to engage with aspects of the built environment and to improve their situation. But there is, I mean, as I reflect, of course there are transactional nature to it, because I may publish this or I may lecture about it, but then, you know, there are, on the receiving end, they also receive benefits, and their voices are a part of the engagement. So I really approach it through a non-hierarchical way and try to really be working with groups that I'm engaging and not working over them. So I think it's, but I hadn't really thought about it as so transactional as you were talking about, Arthur. But yeah, so I think it's how I think about and set up the conceptual framing and ways to try to provide an entry into other spaces that aren't often a part of any of these kind of conversations or work, for that matter.
And I think about really working with communities in terms of achieving a certain level of civic engagement related to belonging and feeling at home, right? And understanding that oftentimes many people, even though, you know, through generations they're from the United States, don't feel like they have full access to citizenship because they don't see themselves reflected in the spaces that represent the country, right? And as a result, if we don't feel like we're connected to the civil society, we don't participate politically in the same levels that we would when we feel like, you know, I belong here, I'm a part of this place, I'm a part of the fabric of what makes this run, and I can see that evidence in the built environment. And once I recognize that, I understand that I have the power to make a certain amount of change. So ultimately, it's a path to full civic engagement as it relates to making concrete change, whether it is related to aspects of environmental impact or any other aspects that are not necessarily architectural, right? It's a path to that end.
I'm going to ask if we could move this conversation to the other room where there's things to eat and drink. But I just wanted to say that no matter how you present your work, whether you call it transactional or not, I think I'm struck by the fact that there's generosity in the choice of how you began your projects. You know, I mean, you began with the observation, you know, you got mad at the trash, and you got mad at the fact that there's such, you know, systemic exclusion of voices that in turn produce exclusion. And I think Nina's generosity in the choices that of projects that you deal with and the scales at which you work. I think that is something that is, you know, beyond, you know, you're not thinking about exchange value. You're really thinking about this needs to be done. And I think that the decision that you make about what you take on in order to initiate a project, I think is really a model for all of us. And so I thank you so much for the conversation, but let's not stop the conversation. Let's move on to the next room.
Thank you.
Thank
you.